Welcome into the Trey Wallace podcast. Man, setting up for a crazy end to the college football season. We've got college basketball season already in full tilt. Before you know it, college baseball season will be here. But the first episode of the Trey Wallace podcast, happy to have my buddy Braden Gall from 440 Sports. Does a myriad of things. ESPN radio, Sirius, you name it. Braden's all over it. Braden Gall, what's up, buddy?
Yes, we are bitter rivals in the SEC deep state cabal. That is,
we are
Fox versus ESPN. No, I'm honored to be here. Honored to be with you, man. On your first episode, I could not be more honored to be a part of it, for sure.
No, man, and I really appreciate it. Long relationship with Braden, and this guy knows his stuff. And look, I can't believe the regular season is pretty much over. It's all the stuff that we've gone through this year in college football. And so we sit here now and we wonder, okay, what does the playoffs look like? What are these, New Year's Six bowl games going to look like? So let's kind of start from there, Braden. Like after the chaos of this past weekend, and the rankings are going to come out and they'll be set where they're at. But your takeaways from how we look at the national championship picture as we sit here right now on this Wednesday.
I think there's two things. One sort of a reminder to college football fans, and one is sort of forward-looking, which I think is the point of your question. It feels like maybe there are multiple tiers at the top, but that Georgia is just significantly better than everybody else. I said back in August, I actually thought Georgia was wildly underrated at number 3. I spent the entire summer telling people this. I don't know why people didn't listen. But if you're going to draw another line, it seems like Ohio State for now, depending on what takes place, of course, against Michigan. I think Michigan, if Blake Corum is healthy, can go in there and actually win that game. But what we saw this past weekend, which ties into, sort of a PSA for college football fans, like look at the top 5 and look at who they played. Number 1 played at 6-4 Kentucky. Number 2 plays at 6-4 Maryland at the time. Michigan plays host to 7-3 Illinois. All of them unranked, by the way. TCU at 6-4 Baylor, Tennessee at 6-4 South Carolina. And I think it's an example. All 5 of them struggling. And obviously Tennessee's defense the worst of all of them. But I think it's a lesson that we forget sometimes, because like in the internet age of like just screaming at each other and hot takes and grievance, like, oh, Kentucky, they suck. Oh, Illinois, they suck. Oh, Baylor, they suck. Like, there's no middle ground. You're either elite or you suck on Twitter, right. And that's not real. Real life is it's really hard to go undefeated in any conference. All of those teams are bowl teams. All those teams have winning records. I think Baylor and Kentucky are probably the 2 best. So I think you can still there's a little difference there, but by and large, they're all kind of the same team. And all the top 5 struggled. And so chaos is always just, chaos is one quarter away, one play away, one bad snap by a long snapper away from sort of taking over the sport. We didn't have that as much this weekend. Tennessee's the only real loser in all of that. So I think it's just a reminder, like, man, college football is really hard. Going undefeated is really hard. Conference play with rivals like Baylor and TCU have known each other for 100 years.
Right, exactly.
Like they hate each other. So it's just one of those moments where I think the whole internet's like, oh, these teams all suck. Look at this, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, no, actually, Baylor's pretty good. Kentucky's pretty good. Illinois is damn good on defense. Like you just have to remind yourself sometimes that these other guys are on scholarship too.
Maryland has Raheem Jarrett.
Right.
He's good.
Their offense is great. So like,
right.
Again, there's some one half of teams in there. Like I think Illinois and Kentucky are certainly maybe far better on defense than they are on offense, for example.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's the lesson. And then I don't think anybody beats Georgia. Like, I don't think anybody,
no.
Michigan has flaws. TCU has flaws. Ohio State has flaws. USC has flaws, although USC might be the most dangerous team in college football. I just don't see anyone matching up in a playoff scenario with Kirby Smart with time to prepare to beat Georgia. I just don't think anybody beats Georgia.
Hey, before we get into the crazy weekend ahead when it comes to rivalry Saturday, let's put a bow. I don't want to put a bow, maybe is the wrong word. Put a bow on Tennessee season. It kind of the way everything played out. Your thoughts? To me, it's Tennessee was always bad on defense. Like this wasn't a shocker in a sense of the defensive part. Like the offense kind of being stagnant, against Carolina. And there's other instances during the year, Hendon Hooker out with a torn ACL. It's now, which is so unfortunate because that young man was having, a fantastic season. Now his NFL time is going to be set back a little bit. But just overall, looking at Tennessee, in my opinion, Braden, they arrived early. Like Josh Heupel got them to a spot early, and the defense finally caught up with them. And look, they were just bad this past weekend, but now they play Vanderbilt on Saturday, and then they've got a bowl game. So just put a bow on Tennessee.
I think you're exactly right. Like, it's just ahead of schedule. And I think it's house money. Like, you can use a lot of different cliches to describe Tennessee. I still think up until last weekend, they were still clearly one of the 4 best teams in college football. They had major defensive issues going back to Florida. Like, this was not, from a statistic standpoint, a talent standpoint, a depth standpoint, there was nothing about this Tennessee defense that said national championship contender, playoff contender. And they played over their heads against, not even over their heads. They played on par with Alabama, dominating an LSU team. They got some help with the schedule there. I think it's a great year to celebrate being a Tennessee fan. Now, how Hendon Hooker dependent is this team currently? Because generally it takes years to build up a roster to be where Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and these teams are. It takes, 4 or 5 recruiting classes to do that. Right. And so Tennessee way ahead of schedule. The defense was always a major question, to your point, but not that bad. I think everybody assumed Spencer Rattler was going to get somebody at some point.
He got him.
He's too talented not to, but that was an outlier performance. Like, that's the best game of his entire career. He's never played that well.
Right.
He's never thrown perfect dimes to back shoulder fades against double coverage. Like, that's never been a thing he's done. And that's college football. And if you're a Tennessee fan, yes, you're waking up and you're pissed off and you're kicking yourself because you had a clear path potentially to the playoff. But at the same time, I think you've got to step back, and after 15 years of misery with just a couple of glimpses of 9-win seasons in there, like, you beat Vanderbilt, you keep them from going to a bowl game, which is not an easy task now because they're playing really, really confident football, and you don't have your star quarterback. I think Tennessee fans will switch quickly from the immediate disappointment of the moment to sort of the broader big picture of that was one hell of a season, one hell of a ride. We got some incredible memories out of it. Let's see what's next for Josh Heupel and the program. I think that's sort of like the big picture view of it. I know that's hard. As a Heisman voter, the Hooker thing is really difficult because, like, I thought Bryce Young was technically better even in that game against Hooker, just because Bryce is like a one-of-one type of player. Like, he's just a unique individual. I don't know how much this is going to hurt his Heisman chances. I think he was one of the 1, 2, or 3 top names on the board. Caleb Williams is making a big push. I think that's the sad thing. Should
he get an invite to New York, though?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Definitely be in New York. Yeah.
And for those that don't know, when you vote, the number of guys that go to New York is not always 3. It's based on where the gap in the voting is. So I would assume
could be 5.
Right. I assume that he is among the top 3 or 3 to 5. Not finishing the season, how much does that matter? It wasn't his necessarily fault that they lost to South Carolina, although he was way off in that game. And that's the sad part, is when you see a great player, and this goes for anybody. This goes for CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Max Duggan at TC. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. You see a great player like Blake Corum's going through this right now for Michigan. You don't want to see elite football games take place without the stars. And that's just, you don't want that. And so that's kind of a, I don't think Joe Milton's the answer. I don't think he ever has been. I've been saying that for years. I think you know that.
Yep.
And so I'm curious what Tennessee looks like next year, but that's a question for 6 months from now, not for right now.
Hey, let's get into the weekend. So, okay, I'm going to throw this at you. LSU wins on Saturday in College Station, making life absolutely, completely, even further miserable for Texas A&M fans, which I think it's going to be some kind of LSU takeover.
Those two fan bases hate each other way more than anyone realizes.
Yes.
Way more.
Oh, yep. It's bad. It's bad.
I love it.
And then we get USC Notre Dame. So coming out, and we're not even talking about Michigan Ohio State yet. So just those 2 games, and then we'll go into the final week where we have championship week. But if you're looking at it right now, who would be your 4th team to get in? If there was chaos, was to be LSU or to be USC?
Assuming TCU wins out and the loser of Ohio State Michigan does not get in.
Right. because the rankings are going to be, how they are, and that's going to be LSU, then USC, but then we'll see if USC can jump them.
I think USC, if USC goes undefeated, that's or finishes the deal with a win over, beating UCLA on the road like that with that much production from Caleb. The defense is a major question. The depth is a question for USC in a playoff situation.
Yeah.
But if you beat USC or you beat UCLA, you beat a very hot Notre Dame team who's got 2 bad losses, but a lot of really nice wins.
Agreed.
On their schedule. I mean, dominating Clemson, dominating North Carolina. Like, they've got some good wins on that schedule, and they're playing really well. They like to run the football, and if they run the football really well, that's USC's one of their big questions is can they physically line up and stop somebody that is big and physical and likes to maul. If USC beats UCLA, beats Notre Dame, and then beats Oregon, let's say, or even Washington, who's got an outside shot, really outside shot, in the Pac-12 championship game, that's 3 top 15, top 20 wins in a row that are going to build that resume up. Their win over Washington State is better than people think. Their win over Oregon State on the road is much better than people think. Their resume is not great right now, but it will be good then if they were to finish with 3 straight wins. And if you're telling me you're a defensive coordinator, who do you want to scheme against in a playoff game? USC ain't the answer, dog.
Nope.
I would play Michigan. I think Michigan's a more complete team.
Yeah,
but I would rather play Michigan 10 times out of 10 than USC if USC is that hot. So USC is the one that I think is really dangerous.
And we can't forget too the Caleb Williams is making a run towards the Heisman. Late in the year too. Like it's not a wrap. If Michigan, Michigan comes out and shuts down, right? If Michigan shuts down CJ Stroud, I mean, we got a conversation.
I mean, I honestly, I'm sitting here a couple of weeks from having to vote, and I cannot tell you who's even in my top 3 right now. Now, I'm not legally allowed to, but I also I honestly, truly have no order. There's 12 guys, and it's a wide open vote this year. I think we're going to see a lot of guys kind of packed in that top 4, 5, 6 for the Heisman for sure.
Okay, let's get to Ohio State, Michigan real quick. Looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be chaos. I think that we got to hope that Blake Corum is playing. Because you don't want to see that matchup without Blake Corum. But you look at this thing overall, man, I mean, this is about as big as you can get. And we've seen big Ohio State, Michigan games in the past. I feel like if Michigan is healthy at the running back spot, that they can run the football on Ohio State and make their life miserable.
Yep.
But then you also look at the opposite side with Ohio State, with CJ Stroud, what they've been able to do, especially with them outside the pocket as well, and their defense. Your opinion, how's it stack up Saturday?
I do think Michigan is far more prepared and evenly matched than I think the vision has been all season long, where it's Ohio State's at home. Ohio State's got the high-flying offense. Going to be hard for them to replicate last year with all that, all that talent that's gone. My bigger question is, Harbaugh made a big switch, man. That's a bold move to go to JJ McCarthy.
Yes, it was.
It has worked all season. They have been dominant all season. Illinois was arguably their second toughest game of the entire year, which is not saying a whole lot about their schedule. And if anyone is being propped up by the quote-unquote national media and the committee, it is in fact the Big Ten, because Ohio State and Michigan have not played nearly the schedules that TCU has or anybody in the SEC.
Right.
So if anyone's getting the benefit of the doubt, it's actually Michigan. And then they played one tough game and their offense looked completely one-dimensional. Then you take the running back off the team and they look even more one-dimensional. Now Harbaugh gets a lot of credit for how he managed the end of that game. And this is where I think Harbaugh gets he doesn't get nearly enough credit for how good of a coach he is, because he takes the field goal knowing that he probably was going to get a stop, comes back and gets another field goal. I do think they're going to run. If Blake Corum's healthy, they will run the football on Ohio State. And Ohio State has not been the offensive dominant juggernaut that we've expected out of them, kind of consistently week in and week out. Notre Dame shut them down with a lot of shell coverage early in the year. You look at what Northwestern did, which is terrible. Iowa actually played them much better than the score indicated.
I agree.
So it's not all like, fairy dust and roses here for Ohio State's offense. CJ Stroud needs to show us that he can take over a game the way Caleb Williams and Hendon Hooker have. He's not really done that this year yet. Doesn't mean he's not capable. Doesn't mean the weapons aren't there, because clearly they are. The problem is that I just don't think the Michigan offense can do that. I don't think if they get into a 20, even if it's just 34-28, or like, I don't know if Michigan can score 30, 35 points in this game. So I think if Blake Corum's healthy and the game's low scoring, Michigan has an absolute chance to win the game outright. But again, what I saw against Illinois from Michigan, against one of the best defenses they played all season,
Yeah.
a lot of concerns about how they're going to throw the football, in particular on the road. But again, I came away from this past weekend thinking that no one is. I thought Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia and Tennessee were always clearly above everybody else. I now feel like Georgia's the only one that's clearly above everybody else. I see flaws with both Ohio State and Michigan.
And Brett Bielema was rightfully pissed off at some of the calls on Saturday.
Yeah, no question.
Didn't go his way. All right. I want to talk to you about this. I mean, well, yeah. Again, that's another story. Lane Kiffin, we have seen over the last 3 years him turn around an Ole Miss program. And I say that in a way of, because I'm about to go somewhere else. Like, it feels like their biggest win of the season has been Kentucky. I think you would probably agree with that. I mean, as we sit here right now, I'm under the impression, and I've talked to both people about this, like he's interested in the Auburn job. Like, that would be something that intrigues him. The money is going to be intriguing for him. But I guess my question for you, Braden, is does that fit in Auburn? We both know how Auburn is. You're 8 square miles of you're just stuck in this town. And it's a lovely town, and it's great. College football is fun. It's a good college atmosphere. But for a guy like Lane Kiffin, does Auburn fit for him after he's already gotten settled in Oxford?
I think 5 years ago, Lane Kiffin, yes. I think 2022 Lane Kiffin is a different Lane Kiffin. And again, we all hear rumors behind the scenes. None of us are really informed about like who's in the room making the decision. Like, it's the agent, the AD, the president, and the coach. Sometimes even fewer people than that. So like, who's actually interested? Again, like, I could text a sitting Power 5 coach right now, and I can get some semblance of an insight onto some coaching searches, and even then there's a lot of smoke screens that are going on right now. So to suggest that anyone knows definitively whether or not Lane is interested in the Auburn job, $100 million offer would make anyone stop and think about it. But I think Lane Kiffin, from what I understand, I think Lane Kiffin is far happier at Ole Miss than people realize. His daughter just is in high school there. His son's going to go to high school there. His father's there. Yep. Like, he's living a great life in Oxford, Mississippi right now. He's calmed down. He's mature. He's a more professional adult head football coach. He's still a funny troll on Twitter. But like, to me, and I've said this on our shows, Fringe Element podcast, by the way, check it out.
Yep.
I think he is the ideal follow-up succession plan to Nick Saban at Alabama whenever that time comes. And so if I'm Lane, why do I want to trade? Because Ole Miss is showing us that once the playoff expands,
they're good.
They're close enough to get in a couple times. Like, they could have gotten in last year.
Right.
This year, I think, to your point about their schedule, this year they're not as good as their record indicated. I've always thought they were a little overvalued, but they're still, considering what they lost and considering how he's built this team, I think he's done an excellent job. I don't think the Auburn thing was a part of their loss to Arkansas. I just think the Ole Miss defense isn't particularly great, and when KJ Jefferson's healthy, Arkansas can pound the football on anybody, and that's what they did. I think that's a kind of a loose narrative that he was distracted by Auburn or whatever.
I mean, come on, they were out there playing wiffle ball on Friday. I mean, let's not act like,
Arkansas is not a bad football team. Like,
no,
okay. So, but the question is, what does Lane Kiffin dream about when he puts his head down at night on his pillow? Like, when he goes to sleep, does he dream about the Lombardi Trophy? Because he's going to get offers from the NFL. Does he dream about, beating Alabama and winning national championships? Well, then you probably need to go to Auburn. That being said, they should have beat Alabama this year, Ole Miss, and Agreed. They could have made the playoff last year. So why jump from that situation where it's calmer, more peaceful, everyone's more aligned, everyone from top to bottom above him buys into his vision at Ole Miss, whereas Auburn, you just never know. I think he's using Auburn to get a raise, like a lot of people are going to do, like Mark Stoops just did.
He just got 8.6, so you got to pay Kiffin 9.5. You got to go at least $1 million over.
Yeah, 9
Stoops.
figures. To me, 9 figures is the only way Auburn and Lane Kiffin even have like a meeting. Like, you got to get to $100 million.
By the way, also
So,
we have the $12 million thing. Where how in the world can you get away and say, okay, we're going to pay Lane Kiffin $12 million a year? Like, okay, $3 million of that better be coming from the boosters on the side.
oh, for sure. I mean, he is an. Here's the thing.
Because
5 years ago,
yeah,
if I was a sitting athletic director at a Power 5 program, I would not have put my job and reputation on the line for Lane Kiffin.
I would now
Just
though.
because.
Yeah,
But today I absolutely would, because he is one of the 2 or 3 best offensive minds in the entire country. But again, I think you think about this, like, who is better positioned and more prepared and more capable and like liked by a fan base to step in following Nick Saban than Lane Kiffin? If he does this at Ole Miss for 3 or 4 more years and Nick Saban decides to retire, who is a better hire than Lane Kiffin? And he can't go there if he's at Auburn. Now, the one thing we haven't touched on is the ego play of being at Auburn and competing against Nick Saban.
I know.
That's the one. But like, can't you do that? I mean, you almost beat him at Ole Miss, so I don't know why you can't do it at Ole Miss too. So.
Why can't you do it 2.5 hours north compared to down 65 or however which way you get to Auburn, and you couldn't
he lives in a very beautiful, awesome, amazing little town with like a gorgeous neighborhood where there's no drama. Or you can move to like another gorgeous, amazing, beautiful, charming neighborhood where like all the parents are like wife swapping. You know what I mean? Like there's a crazy neighborhood down at Auburn, gorgeous, beautiful, amazing, and charming. Then there's this other neighborhood over here. They're like these 2 tiny little, like they're identical except for one is bonkers, and the other one is like super chill and full of like amazing literature. Like it's just,
right. And I think the biggest thing too is his kids get to, like when I was talking to him for a story over the summer, it's all about his kids, man. His daughter moved there. His son wanted to move there. Yep. I've had recent conversations with Lane where like that's a big deal, having family. And I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people forget about that too. And money, Lane Kiffin's got money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know it would be a pump your chest if you could say, hey, look at this fat contract that I signed. But I think Lane Kiffin is different and move past that.
And the other thing about, I think that's the point. Like, like he, again, maybe old Lane 5 years ago wants the job. I think there's a maturity level. There's an evolution to him. Like he's kind of a different dude. Like he wants to kind of be like, he's not like, I want to stand up in front of a podium. Like, cause if you're the head coach at Auburn, you got to do a lot of stuff. You got to be in front of big crowds. You got to be talking to people. You got to be kissing. Like you have to do a lot of stuff when you are the Auburn head coach. It's not that you don't also have to do some of that stuff at Ole Miss, but it's smaller rooms, smaller fishbowl, smaller magnifying glass, smaller everything, and a little bit more aligned and a little bit more calm. And I just think that's very valuable to Lane at this stage in his career.
Braden, last question on the way out, man. Who's going to win the SEC championship? And in your opinion, I'm going to give it to you right now. And I know we are a month away, a little bit over a month from it happening. Does Georgia repeat national champions?
I think they do. I think USC of all teams might be the dangerous one, because if you get in a shootout with them and you can't stop that offense, because they're not going to be able to stop anybody either. That could be really dangerous. I don't think you line up TCU with Georgia, ain't going to happen. Line up Michigan with Georgia, we've already seen it, ain't going to happen.
No.
Ohio State, if they are on all cylinders on offense, can give them a run, and that would be maybe the best matchup talent-wise, but I don't think so. I think the LSU-Georgia game is going to teach us a lot about what that Georgia offense looks like when they're challenged by a really good defensive line. Harold Perkins, BJ Ojolari, that defensive front for LSU is really good, but the secondary is not.
Yep.
I think Jaden Daniels has had an excellent season and he's evolved quickly, but I think Georgia's defense is far too dynamic to, again, they got great weapons, but that LSU offensive line is not good. It's not as good as Tennessee's offensive line.
Right.
So I think you're going to see Georgia eat in that game, as there's a reason it's a 16-point spread. So I think LSU's got a chance to keep it close in the first half. I think eventually Georgia does what Georgia does, which is sit on you on defense and just like physically maul you on offense, hit you with a couple, quirky tight end screen bubble passes and over the middle and double, and all of a sudden you look up and you're down 18 in the fourth quarter and they're pulling away. So Georgia in the SEC championship game, Georgia for everything. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong.
The milkman wins 2 national titles before his time at Georgia is over, and that's Stetson Bennett, by the way. And also, let's not forget, the transfer portal window will open up championship week, and it will be 45 days of madness. So
keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on what happens in College Station when that portal opens.
Yep.
If a lot of players go into that portal, then you know what's up behind the scenes. If there's not a lot of news from College Station, then things are okay in College Station.
I think you're going to
okay
over 15 to 20 players. I think could possibly exit A&M
from A&M. Yeah, I would. If that happens, you got some Florida State stuff taking place in Southeast Texas.
Braden, where can everybody follow you, brother? Your great work.
At Braden Gall on Twitter is the best place. Even though Twitter's turned into a cesspool, you can still follow me there. Still having normal, good college football conversations, like hopefully some normal people. At Braden Gall, that's where we post all of our shows. 440 Sports is our company. We have an SEC fringe element. We do the Cover 2 podcast as well, which is all of college football. So mostly lots of college football. So just at Braden Gall on Twitter will give you a good chance to kind of find all the shows and podcasts and YouTube page, 440 Sports, all that great stuff. So check it all out, see what you think, and then you can tell me how much I hate your team on Twitter. It's fine. So
that's Braden Gall. I'm Trey Wallace. First episode of the Trey Wallace podcast is in the books. We'll be throwing these out there continuously as we get through the rest of the college football season. We've got college basketball transfer portal window opening up, national championship games. It's going to be crazy, and we're all here for it. For Trey Wallace, actually for Braden Gall, I'm Trey Wallace. The podcast is a wrap. Follow everything on Outkick.com. We'll see you next time.